morning, everyone. Are we all ready to learn WTF is grass? Yeah. Okay. I have some small announcements first before we let all these wonderful people do their things. Firstly, we will be having questions at the end, so just hold those. If you want to write it down, cool, but just so you know, no one's being rude if you're like raising your hand and we're ignoring you. So just there's time. Secondly, I'm sure you all have heard this before, but we are currently, there's the charity for NAMI Georgia, which is a mental health organization. Please, if you haven't already, donate. We have it. We ran out of buckets, but we have a cup if you have cash. We also have patches. We got some swag up here for the end. And then additionally, we would love to hear your feedback after the panel. You can do that. We have a wonderful QR code. We love feedback. It helps us get better and better every year. And now we're
And don't forget to rate us in the app, please. Yeah. That's how we get bigger rooms. It doesn't really matter at 10 a.m., but at 10 p.m., it matters a lot.
If anyone tried to go to one of the grown-up panels last night, I'm sure you all know. So, without further ado.
Greetings, y'all. I am Mouse. I am a elementary educator by trade, and just to give you all a little bit of background about why this panel happened. So I'm a very organized moderator. I like to do my moderating homework, come up with questions. Last year I had a nightmare that I was at this panel, I hadn't done my homework, and I sat down and I was like, so, what's grass? So in order to get closure from that nightmare, that's why this panel's happening.
Dragon Con, where all your nightmares come true.
So I would first like all of our lovely panelists to please introduce themselves.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good morning. My name's Cassandra Quave. I'm a professor in the School of Medicine here at Emory University. Oh, I got to eat the mic. Sorry. I'm going to talk about eating grass in a bit. But so I'm a professor in the School of Medicine at Emory University just across town. I am an ethnobotanist. So like I love plants like in a very weird way. And I'm going to share some of that with you.
Hey, I am Dr. Jason Wallace. I'm an associate professor at the University of Georgia, about an hour and a half from here. I study grasses that we do eat. So I study corn, and I've done some work on millets and sorghum, and then some grasses that we don't eat, but that our animals do.
Hi, I'm Brian Kvitko. I am a associate professor in the Department of Plant Pathology at UGA. I also work with this guy. We do a podcast together on science and board games. So in plant pathology, we study plant diseases. So I study the things that try to kill grass.
All right. So without further ado, my first question. So what is grass?
Okay, I'm going to take this because yesterday I tortured two of my panels with that exact same question for their topics.
This one actually has a definition,
Yes,
Jason.
this one, yeah, I'm picking the easy one.
Okay.
So grasses are actually easy. You've probably heard like how trees are the crabs of the plant world and everything is turning into trees. That is not...
Maybe you haven't heard that. That's a different panel.
Sorry. So now you have some homework to do. But anyway, grass actually has a very well-defined definition in science, which is it's this one group of plants that have this certain growth habit, and they're small, bushy things. I mean, you know what grass is. You've walked out, you've touched grass, hopefully. And it grows along in little stems. It sends up little tufty bits. Usually people talk about it in contrast to two closely related things, sedges and rushes, which are much less famous. But there's this lovely rhyme to remember them, is that sedges have edges, rushes are round, grasses have nodes all the way to the ground. The way about this is that if you see something that looks like a grass and you feel the stem and it has edges because it's a triangle, it's not a grass, it's a sedge, because sedges have triangle-shaped stems. If it looks like a grass and you kind of feel the stem and it's long and smooth, then it's a rush, because rushes are round, but they are smooth. Grasses are round, but they've got these little knobbly stems all the way down. Think of like bamboo. If you look at bamboo, it goes up and then there's a knob, and it goes up and there's a knob, and it goes up and there's a knob. That's a grass. And all the grasses are in this one family of plants.
They're
which-
all
Say it
related
with
to
us.
each other.
Poaceae. I like to say that in class.
What happened to Gramineae or Gramineae?
No, you got to follow the angiosperm phylogeny group guidelines. I'm sorry.
All right.
Taxonomists are always renaming things. I think it's just to make sure they keep having a job. I work on a fungus that in my lifetime has been renamed at least 3 or 4 times.
So all grasses are related to one another, and all trees are not. Like, there's a secondary message there. Trees come from all over the place. All grasses are in one family.
All right, and I'm just going to keep going here until Mouse stops me.
I mean, yeah, you're kind of answering my second question of how are grasses different from sedges and rushes.
Yeah. Well, we had the poem.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
poem again?
Well, what about silica?
Well,
Do you-
Oh, wait, let's do the
We
poem
have a request
first.
for the poem. So the
Yeah.
poem is:
Poem.
sedges have edges, rushes are round, grasses have nodes all the way to the ground.
Okay,
and it's a famous poem. So if you Google the
It's
sedges have
famous?
edges, you'll find it.
How famous is this? I've
It's
never heard
famous
this.
on the internet because you can find it with Google.
Where did you learn this?
I don't know. Some
So it's-
random
okay.
podcast years ago.
Evidently, this is something that Jason learned, at cribside. This is a nursery rhyme that his.
Yeah. So my next question, which kind of led into yours, which is like, I've sometimes when I'm touching or grabbing grass, I get cut. Why? Why do I get cut sometimes from grass?
There's lots of tiny pieces of glass in grass.
Glass grass?
Yeah, glass grass. Little bits of silica that are in grass. I'm wondering though, do we also find those in sedges and rush? I don't
Ooh.
know. I don't know that one.
So I was doing that. I can't remember
Yeah.
what the name of those bits of silica
They're
are.
called phytoliths.
Phytoliths. There we go.
They're also important in the fossil record.
Yeah.
Yes, apparently they're not just in grasses, but grasses have lots of them. So they have more than a lot of other plants. It's a defense against herbivores because the grasses don't want to get eaten by and large because they want to grow. The whole grass, the grass lifestyle is to protect itself against herbivores because most plants, if you look at like bushes and stuff, the growing part is at the tip. It's like at the tip of the branch, at the tip of the leaves. And so if an herbivore comes on and eats that, it's like, well, crap. Now I've got to like reinvest a bunch of time and energy to start growing something out from much further in. Grasses take a different tact. Their growing part is at the bottom. It's actually the hardest thing to get. All the stuff above is done growing. And so you can clip that off or mow it as we do now, and then it just comes right back because the growing part is down below. So that's one defense against herbivores, so they're robust. Another one is all the silica in it because it just makes it less palatable. It makes it harder to digest. It grinds down herbivores' teeth, which is why most herbivores that eat mostly grass, their teeth just grow continually throughout the life.
Or they got gigantic teeth like horses that just wear down slowly until they die.
Yes. I mean, literally, the horse's teeth are finite, so if they run out, they will starve to death. So...
Have you ever thought about why cut grass smells the way it does?
It smells so good.
It's actually them screaming with their chemistry. they're screaming to their neighbors, we are under attack, we are under attack. Those are called secondary metabolites or allelochemicals, defense chemicals that are sending out a urgent plea for help because they're getting chomped upon. Yeah.
I read a fantastic review to prepare to sit in this chair, and it said that there are 3 strategies that grasses use to defend themselves, really plants in general. It said get tough, get toxic, or get a bodyguard.
So when they release those chemicals, does that also like communicate to other grass, like danger, danger?
Yeah, so plants have this, I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm a specialist in plant chemistry, so I'll get a little bit nerdy with this. But they will actually release chemicals, not only to communicate with others in the same species, but you can also have cross-species communication. And you can have basically defense molecules. Some plants can produce molecules or upregulate production of molecules to poison the herbivores that are munching on them. I don't know about cases of poisoning as much in grass, but they do release these kind of alert signals.
So I actually work on something exactly like this. So I work on a grass that some of you may actually have in your yard called tall fescue. And I work on it. Even more closer. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. They're not kidding when they say eat the mic. So, all right. So I work on a grass called tall fescue, which some of you may have in your yard. I work on it because I study how grass works with microbes. This grass has recruited a fungus that lives inside it that makes toxins that protect itself from cattle and from insects and nematodes, which are little parasitic worms in the soil. And it was discovered because farmers who had this in their field, they were growing their cattle like, wait a second, it's summer, my cow looks all shaggy, it's starting to get these sores, it's getting gangrene on its tail and its hooves, and they're starting to fall off. This is bad.
Yeah.
And so
you don't want the hooves to fall off. That's an important part of the cow.
Yes. So basically, in this case, yes, the grass has recruited a fungus that basically makes it super toxic to eat. These are related to ergot. If you know ergotism, in like wheat, it's a fungus that if you eat it, it's a hallucinogen thought to cause some of the
I was
weird.
about to say sometimes fungi can be fun.
Yeah, these are not fun. It's cause like seizures and all sorts of other stuff. Some people blame this on the Salem witch trial stuff. We're kind of getting a little off topic there, I think.
I mean, a little bit. Ergot poisoning, that is eating grains, eating grasses, I suppose.
True.
But the fescue parasites, they actually do. Okay, so why do they have them? One would be like, well, it makes them toxic, so herbivores don't eat them. But there's more to it than that, right? Doesn't it also give them like crazy stress responses?
It does. It basically just makes the plant much more successful. And we're still figuring out, that's actually what my research is on, is how is this fungus helping the grass? And this type of fungus is widespread throughout the sort of temperate grasses. Tons of the grasses that are out in the prairies and stuff have some sort of relationship like this. Sometimes it's beneficial. Sometimes the fungus is a parasite. But the grasses overall have developed this multiple times in order to hopefully get something out of it. It doesn't always work out, but when it does, it works out really well.
There is one diagnostic class of secondary metabolite that is very specific to grasses. These are and I practice saying this quite a few times.
Sorry, quick question. What's a metabolite?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to let, I'm sorry. I think you should answer that. I'm going to let Cassandra answer that.
So
Thanks,
what
Mom.
are metabolites? Metabolites are like the chemical language of plants, right? So these are molecules that they make, not necessarily to support, you have primary metabolites to support photosynthesis, right? I mean, these are the only creatures, plants, that can eat light to actually create energy. But secondary metabolites are the molecules that plants make to basically to communicate with each other, to make those beautiful colors in the flowers, those amazing aromas, or to flavor your foods. It's all of that chemistry. That's what a metabolite is.
Yeah, and like, some of the things like caffeine, which I'm sure many of you enjoyed this morning, or nicotine, which many of you probably shouldn't enjoy. Those are alkaloids. Those are also plant chemicals. Mm-hmm. And, many wars have been fought over plant chemicals. That's what the spice wars were about. But there is one class of secondary chemical that grasses make in particular. It's called benzozazanoids. So everybody say that back. Benzozazanoids. There's two Z's and an X in there. So that's a good one. And those are produced primarily from the roots. They have a little sugar stuck onto them that actually often needs to get cleaved off to make them active. So they're actually released in a non-toxic form, and then they get activated after they're produced. So it's a clever way of only making it toxic when there's something that's trying to eat you.
So I was thinking back about like sort of the arms race that grass has with like herbivores, because I think about like, a lot of herbivores, in order to digest grass, have to adapt, like when I think cows, like all of those stomachs of like
just an unnecessary number of stomachs.
I mean, I guess if you're eating grass, it's a necessary number of stomachs. Because like, I know a lot of our cereals are grasses, but then, I always sometimes think of like grasses sometimes being nutritionally poor. Is that like, yeah.
I think we've been talking a lot about what animals eat, and we're thinking of just kind of the lawn or the meadow, but humans eat a ton of grasses. Here, I've got like a full list here. We've got wheat, rice, corn, barley, oats, rye, sorghum, millet. And guess what? These are not just great to eat, but they're also a lot of fun to ferment, where we can make some different brews and spirits off of these. And in fact, that's something that's gotten really popular all over the world. Mm-hmm. Folks have figured out ways to ferment their grasses.
I guess we should talk about the different parts, because when herbivores are eating grasses, they're usually eating the leaves, which are not very nutritionally dense. They're mostly cellulose, which if you know some biology, cellulose is really hard to digest. It's almost like starch, except one of the bonds is just kind of flipped in direction, and that suddenly makes it so almost nothing can touch it.
The sad thing is that it is literally made of glucose. It is a polymer of one of the best energy sources stuck together in a way that makes it almost fully inaccessible.
Yeah, so most things cannot digest it. That's why we have cattle rumen. Basically, one of my work colleagues, he describes cows as basically a walking fermentation bathtub, which that's basically they exist to ferment the grass so they can actually get something out of it, because the cow cannot digest it.
Then it's not even the cow that's digesting it. It's the bacteria and the fungi in the gut. That's what the fermentation is doing.
Yes.
Microbiome.
Yeah.
But then we get to the seeds. And the seeds are usually what we humans like, because that's actually where the plant is packing in tons of nutrients to kickstart the next generation. So there's sugars, there's starches, there's proteins, there's all sorts of little nutrients there. And we humans, through domestication and selection, have made it so what started as kind of fairly small little seeds have gotten bigger and bigger and more energy intense. Most of the grass that we eat, most of these grains, we eat them for energy, for sugars and starches. They're generally not good sources of protein. We have to get those somewhere else, but they're really, really good for just energy. And I mean, if you think about it, throughout most of human history, the number one concern is, can I get enough energy to survive another day? And so we have selected hard on things that just get us that energy. And so that's why almost every culture has developed developed agriculture and some sort of staple crop usually has a source of starch, and it's usually some sort of grass. Not always, like potatoes are a big exception, but usually it's a grass that is good at making grains that we can eat.
A lot of our domesticated grain crops still kind of look like a grass, fundamentally. Wheat looks like a grass, millet looks like a grass. Maize, corn does not really look like grass anymore. Jason, what did you do?
I did nothing. This was the Native Americans. I've got to give props. Like, if you look into the history of like plant domestication, Native Americans were insanely good at what they did with domesticating potatoes and corn and other stuff. They did an amazing amount, adapting it to all sorts of different things. But basically, corn started as a wild grass called teosinte.
Wasn't it like the size of my pinky fingernail when it started? That was your
like
little corn. It was
12 rock hard grains.
That was it.
Yeah, so the ear was about the size of the pinky. It had about 10 or 12 little grains, each of which was encased in what's called a fruit case, which is literally made of silica and it is rock hard. It's like you have to break them open with a sledgehammer. It is actually
Glass is grass.
Yes, it is actually an enduring mystery of like, why did people start eating this? It's like, this is not something you would pick.
Never
Because we'll
underestimate
eat anything.
Yeah, never underestimate hungry humans.
Yes, but through many, many thousands of years of domestication, that went from that to getting rid of the fruit case, because it's really inconvenient, and making many more kernels, much bigger ones. They were stuck to the cob. They made it, instead of having like literally dozens and dozens of little bushy branches, you have generally one main central one. So many changes happened to corn between the wild version and the one we have today, is it took halfway through the 20th century for us to even agree on what was corn's wild ancestor. Was it this plant? Was it something that went extinct? Was it some weird hybrid? No one knew until like clever geneticists actually did some tests and like, okay, it's definitely this one because we can reconstitute corn from this if you do it right. But it took a long time and a lot of work because it's so different from its ancestor.
Do you know what I think the coolest corn is, though? I mean, this is a plant that was rediscovered. It was a product of many years, many generations of indigenous selection in agriculture. It's this corn that can grow in nitrogen-deficient soils, and it has these crazy aerial roots and like this microbial slime that grows on the aerial. So instead of you've got roots kind of out in the air, it's covering this kind of slime embedded with microbes that can basically generate more nitrogen. So it's kind of like a fertilizer machinery with this microbiome on the plant. And I think that's not something we cooked up in a lab. That's something that indigenous people have basically selected for over many centuries. And I think that's fascinating.
It's got booger whiskers.
Yeah.
So is that kind of like nitrogen fixing bacteria on like legumes?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
It's similar. It's not as intimate. So we're talking on all my projects. I have that corn in my field this summer. It's like I've been studying it for the past 5 years.
I need to come in and get samples. That's amazing.
So it comes from the cloud forests, right?
Yeah, it's volcanic valley, so it's very misty. It rains every day, and these above ground roots come out. They're a few inches long, and they make this thick goo of like corn snot. And it turns out that yes, there are bacteria that are just around that can drift into that, and they can start making nitrogen for the plant. And we still don't know exactly how the plant gets it out of them and stuff. That's what me and a colleague in Wisconsin are working on. And the bacteria are like, unlike legumes, which have a very intimate association, you have to have the right bacteria. This seems like it can just take anything that can like survive in that habitat, because we put it in Wisconsin, which is not where this came from, and it will still work.
Really? As long as the humidity's high enough?
Yeah, so which means we have to kind of water it several times a week in order to actually make that work. But it does work. And we actually, in about a month or two, should have the first yield data in terms of can we reduce the need of nitrogen in more U.S. adapted crops from that.
Amazing.
So very preliminary.
How does that corn taste? Have you tried it?
I have not tried that yet.
Is it snotty? The corn itself is not snotty. Okay.
No, the corn itself is not snotty.
Okay.
No, cool. The ears are fine. It's probably actually tastes really good. If people have been growing this to eat for hundreds and hundreds of years, it probably tastes pretty good. It's like we Americans do not appreciate our corn. It's like we just don't. You have to go to Latin America. They know how to treat corn. And if you get good corn, like the stuff that people traditionally grew for grits here or hominy or tortillas, that's good. The stuff we grow here in the US to feed to animals, like we grow it because we can make lots of it and feed it to animals a lot. So that's not nearly so good. Exception is sweet corn, because we do eat that. We care about that. We make that much tastier.
I do love a good sweet corn. It's like one of my favorite foods in the summer.
I've become a corn since I started
You're
this
a corn
research.
snob.
Yes, I'm a corn snob because I grow sweet corn every year. It's like, no, this is best. I can't get this in this grocery store anymore.
So my next question about corn actually is like corn sweat. What is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just saw a story about this, right? Yeah, I mean, so let's see. This is about how plant transpiration. So. Help.
All right, so
I'm bad with jargon. I apologize.
So we're going to use one of your like $1 million Scrabble words to bring out.
Yeah.
So we have all sorts of evapotranspiration.
Yeah.
So evapotranspiration. Okay. It basically means evaporation of water that the plant is sweating out.
Is that through the stomata by chance?
It could, or it could be. Does corn also have hydothodes?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Okay. So look, all plants need water. They need water because they're breaking water apart as part of making sugar. That's what photosynthesis does. It captures sunlight and uses that to split water apart. So they need water for that. But also, plants get hot, just like us, and they actually cool themselves the same way we do. They sweat. They bring more water up to evaporate off their leaves, because when that happens, it takes energy with it, and so it keeps the plant cool. And this happens largely through these little holes that are usually on the bottom of the leaf called stomata. They look like little lips that can open or close. And they just go open and close. And basically, all plants do this. So it's not just corn sweat that are sweating. Like all plants, all grass, all trees, they're all sweating like that. The thing is that here in the US, we have this entire area called the Midwest that is basically nothing but corn and soybeans and maybe the occasional sunflowers. And so they're pumping lots and lots of water from the soil.
Is that affecting the weather?
It is.
What?
Well, okay, but this is the same thing. Okay, so as Jason said, all plants do this, right? They're pulling water up through the roots, up through, their plumbing, their veins, the xylem, out to the leaves, and then it evaporates. The rainforest, one of the reasons the rainforest rains is because all of the transpiration coming from the plants is putting a lot of water into the air, which then can condense into clouds and come back down. Corn's doing the same thing. And it's making it hotter and moister and more humid as a consequence.
I was today years old to realize that the plants help the rainforest.
Oh, yeah.
It's all a cycle. I mean, this is why when you clear cut rainforest, which unfortunately is happening on a massive scale, to basically clear land for cattle grazing and also for soybean cultivation in the Amazon. Those soils are pretty poor, and it does change the weather. It does change the climate when you remove those key factors from the ecosystem. Sorry, I'm like the doomsday climate girl today too. But let's talk about something fun. Can we talk about medicine?
Sure.
Okay.
I like medicine. Drugs are great.
Okay. So when I think about like grasses, I would say they're not like the most advanced on an evolutionary perspective in secondary metabolites. Like they don't have, they don't make a lot of really cool, weird chemical structures like some of our other plant families do. But they can make some really nice molecules like terpenoids. So how many of you have heard of the term essential oil? Right? Okay. So, somebody once asked me, well, what's so essential about an essential oil? It's not that the oil is essential. It is just the aromatic concentration of these terpenes from the plant. And so one of my favorite medicinal grasses, and it's not the one you're thinking of because that's in a different plant family, that's in the Cannabaceae plant family,
Yes.
not the Poaceae.
Yes, marijuana is not actually a grass.
It's not a grass, just for the record. But one of my favorites is actually a plant called, it's called lemongrass.
Oh.
Lemongrass, and it smells like lemon because it has these molecules like limonene and citral and geraniol. And I had an adventure a long time ago in the Amazon where I ate a bunch of ants and I got very sick. It's a long story, but let's just say I had lemongrass tea, and then I put a healer put a bunch of lemongrass on my chest. I had aromatherapy and I had a tea, and it helped my tummy after I ate too many rainforest ants. So if you're ever, maybe you're not going to be eating ants, but if you ever have a tummy ache, it makes a very nice tea ingredient, and also it's just nice as an aromatherapy to calm your stomach down.
So are there herbs that we use other than lemongrass? I can't think about too many like Poaceae that are specifically for flavor.
For flavor, well, once they're fermented,
Of course. But those
do like to
flavors are
visit
not
my
necessarily coming
distilleries.
directly from the grass, though, right? Those are coming from the microbes.
Yeah, they're coming from the microbes. That's cheating. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No cheating.
I can't think of any, no.
For flavorings, maybe lemongrass is like really special.
Like- Oh, just closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry. I need to get closer to the mic. I think maybe lemongrass is really special there. But there are other medicines from grasses. If any of you have ever had eczema, you may have gone into the store and found these kind of oat powders, colloidal oatmeal to bathe with, and that's very calming on the skin. It actually works on an inflammation pathway, the NF-kappa B pathway, to help calm some inflammation, and is very soothing. You can also have plants in medicine just because of their starch content. If you think about like barley water and even kind of rice water to help with digestive issues. Those are some other, but again, they're not like super advanced like we have, like it's not like the opium poppy, right? And that has some really cool chemistry. But
just a quick question about like the oatmeal bath. Is that like the same as breakfast oatmeal, or is it a different kind of oatmeal?
I think it's the same. It's a Vena sativa. It's just ground up really fine.
Okay, cool. Because I was always like, is this like, Quaker oats, but
Yeah, you're
not.
just making yourself into a porridge.
That's it.
Hey, so question on this. I was just thinking I was trying to rack my brain for any sort of grass that has a lot of this sort of chemical thing. What ethnobotanist, sweetgrass. I know sweetgrass is important for indigenous cultures here in the U.S. I don't know a lot of details about it. Does that have anything interesting? I know it smells like vanilla.
Yeah, it has so it's rich in coumarins. That's what gives it that kind of vanilla flavor or smell. I think it's more used in handicrafts. I'm not as familiar with the use of sweetgrass. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not as familiar with the use of sweetgrass. There's a great book though by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, if you've ever heard of that. But it's more, I think, in handicrafts. I think there is another really cool grass. I do a lot of field work in the Mediterranean, and there's this really big grass. It's called the giant reed, Arundodonax. I love throwing science names out there. Sorry. So we can all say Arundodonax. So this is this really cool tall grass, and historically you would use it as like a barrier between your different vineyards, and they would actually harvest this grass, and when it dries, it becomes hard, kind of like a bamboo in a way, but skinnier. And so they would use that to prop up the grapevines, but they have all these other crazy cool uses as well. So imagine before you had a lot of use of money to exchange, to purchase things, you could actually take this grass, split it in two, and use it as a bartering tool. So let's say you gentlemen in the front row have a cow, and I need some of your milk, and I have a cow, you've got a cow. We combine our cow's milk to make cheese for my family one week, and then I give you milk to make cheese for your family the next week. So we can track our exchanges of the milk or our exchanges of different things in a bartering system by putting these two halves of that bamboo-like plant together. They also use it to protect their fingers when you're doing the grain harvest because they're hard. And they make these like finger guards. You can make flutes out of it. And then you can also take this inner at the node, those little pieces at the beginning, the nodes. There's a little white hemicellulose like membrane that occurs there. So when you split this reed open, you can pull that cellulose membrane out and stuff it into any wounds that you have. Like say if you cut yourself when you're working out in the fields, it stops the bleeding. So it's a really crazily versatile plant, and it's also used in ritual healing of toothache because they cut out little pieces of it that look like little teeth, and they do little crosses on your face to help you through toothache. I mean, a crazy simple grass, not very interesting from a chemical perspective, but lots of uses.
I wanted to talk, there were two weird things I wanted to talk about if that was okay, and I want to get you guys' help. One is about bamboo. Just let's talk about what we know about bamboo. And then the other thing I figured Jason would be able to talk about why grasses do photosynthesis weird.
Wait, what?
I want to hear this. Yeah.
Which mouse do you want to choose? Which one do you want to talk about first?
I kind of want to know about the photosynthesis because you said photosynthesis weird, and that perked my ears up.
Yeah. You want to do it?
Sure. Okay. So, photosynthesis is the process of plants capturing light and turning carbon dioxide and water into sugar. It's basically the foundation of all life on the planet except for like deep sea hydrothermal vents and tube worms. So it's like that capturing sunlight is what makes the biosphere go round. And most plants do this with one particular pathway that is called the C3 pathway. It's called that because it involves a compound that has 3 carbons in it, so C3. The thing is, grasses figured out an alternative approach called C4. It uses a 4-carbon compound, and people aren't really sure like why grasses are good at this because there's still debate about whether this showed up once and then was lost a bunch of times, or whether grasses are just really good and they just made it like 30 times independently. Still argument going around about how exactly that ties together. But the thing is that this C4 method is there to deal with one of the problems of photosynthesis, in that photosynthesis evolved in a situation in which there was no oxygen around. Oxygen was a waste product that these early organisms were pumping out. And it was quickly grabbed on by iron and other things, and so it never really accumulated. It was fine. And the enzyme that does this is called rubisco, and I don't remember what that stands for.
Rubisco? It's ribulose bisphosphate carboxylase, I think, or something very close to that.
As
so, rubisco.
one knows.
Yeah, there's a reason we call it rubisco.
Anyway, because it evolved in this low oxygen environment, it's actually not very good at dealing with oxygen. And when there's no oxygen around, that's fine. But then suddenly when you have 20% oxygen in your atmosphere, well, not so suddenly, it took several 100 million years for that to happen, but when, like today, rubisco actually doesn't deal with oxygen well. It does this thing called photorespiration, where it will actually recombine with oxygen. It will undo the work it has done and just kind of waste energy at like 30%, 25, 30%. And it's worse like when it's hot and when it's kind of dry. But the thing is, evolution gets kind of locked. Like if something is as important as the thing that makes all your food, and it's like here in an evolutionary peak, and there's a better version over here, but getting from point A to point B involves going down to worse, evolution will never select that because you will die. or you will at least lose out to your
You'll get
neighbors. And so
outcompeted.
we're stuck with basically a subpar rubisco. So grasses and the C4 system is to try to help fix this. What it does is it actually separates the two parts of photosynthesis that happen. It does first capture, it will capture the carbon in the outside part, and then it will pump it to an inside part and let it go. So the inside part has crazy high levels of carbon dioxide in that very tiny part of the plant. And so this oxygen thing is not nearly as much a problem. And so it's doing these little pumping things to essentially make a very high local concentration of carbon dioxide to do photosynthesis better. And this is why a lot, not all, but many of the most productive grain crops are C4 plants. So corn is one, sorghum, sugarcane can make insane amounts of biomass and sugar every year. And it's because they have this. And there's actually people who are working to see, can we get this to work in rice? Can we get this to work in wheat and get them to just be more efficient? And those are super long-term things. I mean, we're talking decades of research to try to make that happen. But if it works, it could be essentially a potential other green revolution, because it would make the food production much more efficient for those crops.
And you said that not all grasses are C4, but you mentioned that one of the things that makes photosynthesis works is high temperatures, right? Which is why a lot of these drier, more arid environments are now grasslands, because they do better in those environments than trees, right?
Yeah, actually grasses have been wildly successful in evolution. There's still some debate about how old they are, at least dinosaur level, like 66, 70 million years. I've heard up to like 120. It's hard because it's hard to get fossils of those things. But they are widespread, I think like 40.
40% of land mass is covered by grasses.
And they are on every continent, including Antarctica.
There's grasslands in Antarctica?
Well, there is a species of grass. There are only 2 species of flowering plants that live in Antarctica, but one of them is a grass.
So it's a 50-50 split, is what you're saying.
Yes.
And so then what was the other question? Because I completely forgot.
Oh, just bamboo. It is cool.
Oh, yes, bamboo.
Is it like the fastest growing grass? Do I have that right?
It's a grass that's really doing its very best attempt at an impression of a tree. Right, being tall. And the other thing is that bamboo, a lot of bamboo is clonal. They're like the aspen groves. It's actually one giant population of identical individuals. And from what I understand from talking to somebody else who studies this a lot more than I do, we don't actually know what causes bamboo to flower. And when it flowers, it dies.
Like it flowers once every 50 years or something. It takes a very long time.
We don't know what triggers it. And once they do, then they die.
So like the whole forest, if they all flower.
And then they regrow.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah, so bamboo is really cool because it's very structurally strong. You've probably seen, we don't do it here because we don't grow that much bamboo here, but like over in China and Japan, they'll build scaffolding out of bamboo instead of out of steel because it's a cheap, local, renewable resource. And while doing research for this, I found those scaffolds can actually be more resilient than steel scaffolds. If you get a typhoon that hits, a bamboo scaffold will survive where a steel one will not. Probably because they're more flexible. The wood structure is more flexible, can deal with the stresses better.
I think what's cool too is you probably have tasted bamboo shoots in some of your food. It's actually rich in these secondary metabolites, again, called phytosterols, that are also used in traditional Chinese medicine to treat fever and cough. So it's a food and a medicine when it's in that early shoot stage.
And also supposedly, possibly anachronistic, but used for torture. Bamboo shoots.
There's that.
This is a 10 a.m. panel.
Yeah. Okay, I forgot. Sorry.
But other fun, cool thing about bamboo, so trivia fact, apparently, when humans were migrating out of Africa, we have the fossil records, we see tools and everything, stone tools of certain things. When they reach Southeast Asia, the stone tools stop. And the hypothesis is that they started replacing them with bamboo tools instead. Which don't preserve, but bamboo's a heck of a lot easier to shape than stone is, and it's abundant. And so if you can make a knife out of bamboo, and maybe it only lasts you for a few months, but it's a lot quicker and easier than trying to make a stone tool that might break on you. So
I want a bamboo knife.
So I think I'd like to move on to our next topic about how we consume different cereal grains. So my first question is, We consume lots of different cereal grains in a variety of ways. What are some of your favorite ways that humans have turned grains into food?
Food other than like bread? I mean, bread's the big one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, any kind.
Yeah. My favorite, I mean, bread's pretty great.
I also really love pasta.
Yeah.
So, and whiskey. I mean, I know I keep turning back to fermentation. I love microbes and plant relationships. It's really a beautiful thing, you know, to see them come together. You want to talk about malting?
Yeah, let's talk about malting.
Okay, well, do we all know what malting is? You're basically kind of kickstarting those seeds. They start to grow, and then we wet them. We let them kind of start going, and then they start to have this enzyme called amylase that breaks down some of the sugars, makes the sugars available in the seeds, basically breaks them down just enough to make it accessible for the fermentation process, because microbes need to eat the sugar to make the boozy booze fun stuff.
Did we ever, okay, I remember tell me if you've ever done this. When you were a kid, did you ever do an experiment where you just held a saltine in your mouth for a while and eventually it starts to taste sweet? No, you never did that? You should try it. You just stick one in your cheek and just hold it there. You've got amylase in your saliva, right? So it's that process of taking the starch and breaking it down into simple sugars, because the yeast can't use starch. Yeast can't use cellulose, but yeast likes to grow on maltose.
So wait, are all grains, in order to turn it into booze, like they have to be sprouted? You can't just put the seeds in there and hope for the best?
They have to be broken down to sugar somehow. And there's a few different ways. Like sprouting them is a natural way because the seed starts breaking down for the growing plant. But again, we have amylase, so it is a thing. Like you can like chew the seeds and like spit them out, and the amylase there will break it down to sugar.
Yum.
This is a thing.
This is how you make, anyone ever heard of masato from the Peruvian Amazon? It's where you take cassava. It's like the big bucket of spit beer. They sell it in the marketplace. I've drunk it in villages. I'm a little bit leery of like the general market spit beer. But yeah, same principle. You're taking your own amylase to start breaking down those starches in the cassava. Again, not a grass, by the way. That's in the Euphorbiaceae family, the spurge family. Very toxic family, interestingly enough.
So let's see. So there's bread, there's pasta, beer. Again, when you think about it, bread and beer are really the first processed foods, really.
That's what the Egyptians paid their laborers in, basically. It was like, here's bread and here's beer, which is almost more like a beer oatmeal, like thick porridgey thing with alcohol in it.
Yeah, you've heard this joke before. When you have cheese and beer, you have a loaf of milk and a bottle of bread.
Well, these weren't like super high alcohol content back then either, right? They're not like the 9% IPAs or whatever we drink today, or maybe I drink. I don't know.
Yeah, because again, I think about also with grains is you also want to be able to store those calories for later, and so I know alcohol is one way to store those calories for later, but then how else can we try to help store those calories? Because that's really important for post-growing season. Not so much now, but in human history.
I think the easiest way to store them is as the dried grain.
Yeah.
The seeds are meant to last. They're meant to stick around. That's their job, is to just be little tanks of energy waiting around for the right conditions. And so if you can keep the conditions not right, if you can keep them nice and dry and protected and keep them away from all the other pests that also want to eat them, they'll last a really long time. And so granaries were an early invention of humans to store grain and just keep them safe in order for us to make them last through the dry season or whatever. It's actually interesting. If you look historically, the first farmers, the first farming settlements, their health relative to their hunter-gatherer compatriots actually went down. It's they were not nearly as healthy as their other hunter-gatherers around, but it was more stable. And the thing is, if I'm at 80% health all the time, and you're 100% health, and then a famine hits and you die, I win. So that's why it's thought why agriculture spread at first, because even though it was not as nutritionally good, it was more reliable, and that's thought to be kind of what kickstarted early agriculture.
I think what else is different about early agriculture compared to modern day agriculture is we really engage in this technique known as monoculture, right? Our fields are all uniform. And guess what? When you remove biodiversity from an agricultural system, you're at risk of crop failures. Like we've seen this already in the banana apocalypse or apocalypse. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The fungal.
Michelle and the Cavendish.
Yeah, the Cavendish and the Gross Michelle, and how a fungus is kind of making all the bananas go blip. And we need to figure that one out. But in a lot of early ag, you didn't just have one type of rice or one variety of wheat. You would have different types of varieties, and often they would keep these varieties also during different climatic events. So if you have a heavier rain year, you may plant a certain type of crop over another. And we've kind of gotten away from that. We do, of course, have seed banks. Anyone ever heard of the Doomsday Vault that's up in the Arctic, right? So we're able to save those. And indeed, we're not just saving current cultivars, but we're also looking to save what are known as crop wild relatives. So these are kind of the untamed wild ones that we don't necessarily eat today, but could be important sources of genes that we could then use to optimize future crops with.
Oh, I have a thing now. Thank
Yes.
you. Okay, the importance of wild relatives. So, I think we already talked about, and we all know that plants get diseases. Grains get diseases. There's a variety of them. Some of them are tasty, like corn smut, for instance, where the kernels get replaced with basically a mushroom. And it is functionally a mushroom growing inside the kernel. Some are really bad. Some will destroy crops and productivity. Now, plants do have an immune system, but it's hard encoded into their genes. They don't have antibodies like you do. They do have receptors that they can use to detect pathogens, but when a plant germinates, that's all it's going to get. So how do we get new genes? How do we get genes that are going to help? It's maintaining biodiversity, and it's by breeding with these wild relatives. We can find genes for diseases because in the same way that we have dealt with antibiotic resistance, where bacteria sort of get around our defenses, a lot of these plant pathogens will do the same thing. They evolve around our best resistance genes. So we have to be able to breed in those new resistance genes to help fix that or help to keep pace. We can't fix it. It's always going to be a problem, and we always have to kind of keep up on it.
Yeah, and I mean, plant breeding's really important, not just for pathogens, but also think about like if you have an area where you need to grow crops and there's a lot more salt in the terrain, or if you have a very arid area or a place that's very wet. So there are lots of great adaptive mechanisms we can pull from some of these wild relatives.
Yeah, and I'll say this sort of adaptation, I mentioned earlier like how great of plant breeders the Native Americans were. This is why things like corn and potatoes spread all over the world, is because they had already adapted them to all these things. Like the Incas had a variety of potato for every level of their mountains, for if it was rainy, if it was dry, if it was hot, if it was cold. And so there were already varieties pre-adapted to pretty much anywhere on earth you could want to take it. Same thing with corn. There's a lot already existing there. And this is something I'd like to throw out. So we talk about diversity. And I think we've driven out, as in many things, but also true in agriculture, diversity is important. Diversity is what gives resilience. But let's put this in perspective. So I like pulling out the stats. So if you take any two varieties of corn, like just traditional varieties, and you compare their genomes, there are more differences between those two varieties of corn than there are between us and chimpanzees.
Really? That's insane.
Yes, it is. That's probably more because we humans are actually a very low diversity species, but corn actually has a ton of genetic diversity in it, and we've used that it's been what's called a model organism, so a species that we study to learn things about how stuff works, and corn has been used for over 100 years for that purpose because it has such rich diversity there, and so there's a lot to be dug out there. And a lot of our grasses have this because a lot of them are wind pollinated, which really helps mix things around. So you can have massive areas where everything is essentially crossbreeding with everything else. And it really helps create and maintain large levels of diversity like that.
So I have a kind of a philosophical question about corn. When we think about how pervasive corn is in our current diets, I mean, we eat corn every day, even when we don't think we're eating corn. It's like broken down to all these crazy little component parts. It's mixed in our cereals. It's what sweetens our beverages. It's even, I think, in some cases added to some of our juices to make our juices even sweeter. I mean, do you think someday in the future, let's say 500 years from now, scientists are going to look back and call us the era of the corn people? And is it really us cultivating corn, or is corn cultivating us?
It's symbiotic.
Yeah, you may have heard that corn cannot reproduce on its own. We have actually bred it to the point where the kernels are so tightly packed that they don't fall apart, that if you plant that just falls over somehow, they'll all grow together, they'll all compete with each other, and they'll all basically die and starve. So like, we are dependent on corn as a culture, but corn is dependent on us as a species.
So is this the corn age or the plastic age, or both?
I'm just going to go with the Anthropocene, because there's all sorts of stuff that we do. Let's get off of corn. We've talked enough about corn.
Yeah,
I know
we
this is
have.
my area, but let's
Stop
talk about other
being so
We should
grasses.
talk about
corny.
rice.
I mean, come on.
It's too corny.
I think you broke Mouse.
Mouse, are you okay?
I'm sorry, Mouse.
You don't understand. I'm an elementary school teacher. The punnier, the better. So for
You got two dads on your panel, man. You opened up a door.
I did get some of my training at Cornell, which is actually where I did learn how to work with corn.
Okay, all right. So we sort of talked about this a little bit in our.
Let's really get grainy on this.
I am trying.
See, that's the response you're supposed to give.
Okay, so we sort of talked this again with the climate change and stuff like that, and with grains being so integral, and climate change being a thing.
Are you sure that does not align with current federal policy?
Shut up. I was about to say shut up, but I'm like, no, you're nice. But yeah, like, what do we need to do to try to protect our grain supply? Because, like, you know.
From climate change?
Yeah. Oh man. Let's start simple,
Sure.
because I think it gets overwhelming. It gets overwhelming for me. It probably gets overwhelming for many people. I think one of the key ways is to think about, how do you conserve biodiversity at home? And just in general, how do we protect our pollinators? How do we increase biodiversity in our community gardens, in our parks, in our homes, if we have any land? And there are a lot of ways you can do that. Plant native plants. Read books by authors like Doug Tallamy, who's an entomologist, has done amazing work, and really has some great guides on how to increase diversity at home. There's something called the Homegrown National Park. And by the way, I have no investment interest in any of this, but it is conflict free. But I love this site because you can go into their website. It'll tell you what types of plants you can grow or plant in your area to help boost biodiversity. Let's start at home and also hug a tree, because we have to get connected to our local environments. But then there are other bigger changes I'm sure that we can talk about on a larger level.
Yeah, so number one, I think, is what we've already talked about: conserve diversity, because there are already plants out there in most of our grain crops that are adapted to these really hot or drier or whatever conditions are going to happen. They just may not be very good in modern agricultural systems, but they have good genes that we could mine out for that purpose. And so we need to conserve them so we have them, because it's much harder to make them if they're lost than it is to take advantage of something that's already there. Another one is we may end up needing to ship things. This country specifically has invested very, very heavily in growing corn. And we are very, very good at it. And we are amazing in terms of it. But corn may not, maybe don't tell my colleagues this, but corn may not be the best crop to grow as things keep changing, because it requires a lot of water. It requires a lot of nutrients. It has some close relatives like sorghum, which we don't grow very much of here in this country. People from the South may know of sorghum syrup. It is grown a little bit. It's a very close relative of corn, but it is much more drought tolerant. So it can do with much less water and needs less nutrients. And it does not yield as well as corn does right now. But if we were to invest a lot into it, it probably could. Now, how to make that happen, I don't know, because like you could try some government policy stuff, but there's also companies are very deeply invested in the current one, and it's much easier for them to just make better corn than it is to completely shift tracks to a different crop. I'm of the opinion that we should try several tactics because I'm bad at predicting the future, and so I don't know which one will work. So if we try like 5 or 6 different things, hopefully one of them will pan out.
I think for all of this, it's like resilience is going to require flexibility. Right. And that means that we need to be more flexible. That includes things like our crop systems. That includes the things that we're breeding, developing. We need things that are going to be able to deal with aridity because we know that we're going to be seeing large changes in rainfall, both places getting far more and far less. So yeah, sticking with one thing and being like, well, this has to work forever. That's not really going to work.
Backup plan for the backup plan.
Yeah, but I don't want to be all doom and gloom here because I think that projections have also said that, like, you know, we've been in a situation of population rise, but the projections also say that we kind of think that global population is going to stabilize by 2050. Now, that means that as long as we can figure out how to do that sustainably, if we can reach that milestone, if we can figure out how to keep feeding those people by 2050, we should be fine. It's not all dire. It's not going to be easy, but it's not all dire.
All right, so I would like to turn this over to audience questions. Please have it be a question. If you start telling me a story, I will cut you off.
Also, when you're holding the mic, I'll be holding the mic, but when you're talking into the mic, talk directly at the mic. If you go like this, no one can hear you. If you go like this, people can hear you.
Hi, so we talked about like breeding and how we breed crops to yield as much stuff as possible that we can eat. But what about, given the scale that we produce at, what are some ways that we can or should or are trying to utilize all the different parts of these grasses that we're not eating or we're not feeding to animals and that kind of stuff?
Gotcha. I like your cosplay, by the way.
Well, in many cases, we do use the other plants just for different purposes. So we harvest the grains. What's left is usually called silage, and it can be fed to animals, or sometimes it's left on the ground as like a weed cover to keep weeds from growing. It's plowed back in to put more carbon back into the soil. So we actually are using the other parts of the plant, just not to eat. We're using them for other purposes already. And people have explored turning them into biofuels and stuff. But it is generally the case that for any of these things, there's probably like 3 or 4 things we could do with them, and we can only pick one. So people are exploring that, but we are actually already using a lot of what we normally consider waste products actually are beneficial for something else.
I guess we've also got the first generation biofuels were using grains and fermenting them into alcohol. Second generation biofuels are cellulosic ethanol, taking that glucose in the cellulose, trying to break that down in a way that you can use it to make alcohol from that, which would be probably a better way to do it instead of using food to make fuel.
If grasses and grains are all so high energy but low protein, why are they used in plant-based proteins for like fake meats and whatnot?
I think within fake meats, I don't know, they are used, but we have a heavier reliance on things like pea protein and soy, which are more protein rich. I have a whole thing about fake meats. I think if you want to eat like vegetables, please eat vegetables. Like a lot of the fake meat products are extremely processed, and there are no lab-grown meats grown without animal products. The basis of cell culture requires that you grow your cells in something called fetal bovine serum, which is basically baby cow juice. So like, get beyond the marketing hype to really understand what you're consuming. I also have a podcast called Foodie Pharmacology where I speak with experts on this very topic. And we have some episodes on alternate protein sources and kind of lab-grown meats you can check out.
I saw somewhere that palm trees are grass, and I wanted to know more about that, if that's true or not.
They're not a grass. They're in the Ericaceae family, but maybe you want to talk a bit more about.
Yeah.
They are
Yeah.
monocots, though.
They're
yes?
monocots,
yes.
Okay, so this is the thing. The plants come in plants come in a bunch of varieties. Flowering
plus
plants.
varieties.
Flowering plants come in 2 varieties. Dicots, named because when they sprout, they have 2 leaves, and monocots, which have 1. So palm trees are monocots, and grasses are also monocots, but palm trees are not grasses. They're a different type of monocot.
Onions and garlic, those are also monocots. So if you ever see onion grass, that's not grass either. That's a relative. Well, it's in the much larger family of monocots.
I was wondering why we use like grasses and different types of grasses. We explained earlier, like ones that are like spiky and ones that are more round. Why do we use types of grasses as like landscape covering, like in like residential areas, in just like community? There, like instead of other plants that are also like very hardy and durable, like moss or clovers or other things like that.
Man, I would love it if all of you had like not the monolithic like grass lawn. It's like it's the biggest crop that we grow in the United States.
Turf.
Is turf, right? It is our most expansive crop. You can, like I said, bring biodiversity home. There's nothing stopping you from having lots of other flowering plants, mosses. Like there's lots of ways to diversify your landscape. This kind of is more of a cultural thing, is why we have grass as our kind of dominant species in suburban neighborhoods. But there are lots of other plants that you can easily grow in that land. Maybe you have something else to add.
It's 100% a cultural thing. That's all that it is. In fact, it takes a lot of effort. I can't remember. I think this like has its origins in like the landscapes and gardens of English manors.
Pastoral English manors with their sheep.
Just got brought over, and now
Yeah.
it's just like a cultural expectation that you do this, and I don't know.
Yeah, I've given up on my lawn, and it's really nice to see like the wild all over, and I get to see so many animals coming in. Like a couple days ago, there was a deer chewing on some jewelweed. It was lovely.
I mean, you think about how much effort and how many chemicals we pump into our lawns. I love having a wild lawn. Now, I cut the lawn. I leave it wild, but we let it grow and then we cut it back every once in a while, or the neighbors get upset with us. But like, I can go and harvest dandelion greens from my yard because I know I haven't sprayed my yard with anything, and they are delicious, by the way, if you've never had them before. So you can make your yard into an edible landscape as well, not just, it doesn't have to be confined to like a raised bed garden.
I don't remember the origin of this. I wish I did, and I might be paraphrasing it, but your average lawn is life bereft of sex and death because you never let it reproduce and you never let it be anything but green.
So you talked about when you mow grass, and the smell is them sending out these distress signals to the other grass around it. What response is the grass expecting to get back from that distress call?
Well, some plants can actually ramp up production of defense molecules. So when it's a lawnmower, they don't have a shot, right? Because the lawnmower's survival is not dependent upon their ability to eat this grass. But there are examples. I know there are specifically examples in certain trees where they can release these chemical signals, and then the neighboring populations of trees can actually increase production of molecules that have, for example, hydrogen cyanide. So they can give like the other herbivores, as they go through that population, they can poison them with cyanide, as one example. So like they can basically signal to each other, hey, if we're under massive attack, ramp up whatever defensive mechanisms you've got.
And also there are parasitoid wasps have learned to listen in, like detect these compounds and say, oh, there's a caterpillar here that I can then lay my eggs inside. And so it's also calling to those parasitoids to come and kill the thing eating it, basically.
Mm-hmm. I just love that grasses have a group chat.
Yeah, for sure. Get a bodyguard, right? You can't protect yourself, but there are other people who could. So, but you got to let them know.
I think that should be like my cosplay next year. I can be a plant bodyguard. I like that.
You're going to be a parasitoid wasp?
Yeah, why not? I mean, if you were
Dragon Con.
If you were at Mouse's session last night, we learned a lot about Mothman, and there's a lot of stuff I have to uncover there with
Again,
wasps.
10 a.m. panel.
10 p.m. panel. Yeah, different.
Hi, so I have a question about, so there's a lot of sports that involve different kinds of grass, like golf, football, soccer, baseball. Some of these are being replaced with artificial turf, which has some downsides and health risks. But I was wondering, since these are so expensive, the watering the lawn and usually curated kinds of grass, are there efforts to use other kinds of grasses or plants to replace these that are maybe more water efficient, or like with golf courses, more natural or native plants?
Oh man, golf courses are a tricky situation. They have very specific demands.
Like toxic waste.
I'm going to say expectations. I'm going to say demands. That would be exactly such and such a way.
Yes, I will say, I don't know about natives. The drought resistance, if a golf course can get away with putting on less water and less chemicals, all of that costs money, and they want to do that. So that is definitely a thing. In fact, University of Georgia has a very successful turf breeding program, and some of their drought-tolerant varieties have spread across the world to golf courses because they're able to deal with much less water.
You said that grasses are able to be mown down because they grow from the bottom, not from the top. So if that is the case, then how do they go to seed? What is the mechanism behind that?
Okay, so if they grow from the bottom, how do they go to seed? So that's the one exception. So that's when they send up a little shoot that has growing stuff at the top to make the seeds and make everything there. But everything else, like the thing that is growing, the shoot pushing it out, is actually still down at the bottom. But there is another little set of cells at the top that specifically is designed to turn into seeds or pollen or whatever. And so that's the one exception.
Although grass don't have to reproduce with seeds. They can reproduce below the ground too, clonally, by sending off runners and things like that.
Well, some grasses. Corn doesn't.
No.
A lot of our crops don't. They're annuals, although some people are working to change that to get perennial grains.
Mm-hmm. That giant reed I talked about in Italy does that. It goes rhizomes. Yeah.
All right, last question.
I've actually been wanting to replace my entire lawn with native grasses for years, and there's a lot of information on how to do that, but I'm more having trouble with how to destroy an entire lawn on purpose.
There's really good things you can use to kill plants, but you probably shouldn't do that.
So not a gardener. I would say look into the groups that do this. So the Georgia Native Plant Society is a good one. There are some landscaping companies that actually specialize in native plants. They would be good places to check. I can't really give much more than that. I know that the State Botanical Garden in Athens has nativized some of its power line pathways, and apparently it was a multi-year process of going in, finding the invasive grasses that were not native, getting rid of them and stuff. It took several years for the native ecology to get a strong enough foothold to keep that other stuff out on its own. So it is a long process. Even when you're these people know what they're doing, they are native plant researchers. It takes a while. So you're not going to be able to do that easily, unfortunately. But if you put in the effort long enough, it will kind of become self-sustaining because it will now start crowding out other things.
Because they should be better adapted, right? But you can't it's not a one and done.
Just be careful about the deer because they may look cute, but they love native plants.
So that is this will conclude our panel. But before you all go, where can folks find you at other panels here at DragonCon?
Amazing. Well, I am heading right now over to the Marriott. We have a super fun science fair, and whoever wants to learn more about plants, I also direct the herbarium at Emory, and we're going to have lots of hands-on things and examples of really cool medicines and maybe some poisons that you can look and not touch. We'll have on display. Also, if you want to learn more about cool plant chemistry and medicinal plants, you can follow me on Substack. I write Nature's Pharmacy. We have a readership of 24,000. I'd love to make that 24,100 or however many are here today. So thanks.
All right, so at 1 o'clock today in the Crystal Ballroom, I will be moderating Dr. Robotnik's Guide to World Domination. So please stop by. And then tomorrow I'll be on the panel Slime Time. And lastly, you can check out both me and Brian at our podcast, Gaming with Science. If you like board games and you like science, go ahead and check it out. We've got ribbons here in the back if you want to grab some.
Yep. And no more panels for me. Thank you for joining me for my last one. But yeah, you can find us on gamingwithscience.net and many of the socials on that same basic tag. We have a Discord too. There's not that many people there, but maybe you could come hang out.
And if you like my vibe as a moderator at 4, we have Dire Wolves at Home panel in this room.
Yeah, come see Mouse Break.
It's just because I'm so expressive.
We have a cornucopia of options.
I had to.
Well, thank y'all. You've been lovely.